Over the weekend, sources tell CNN there is growing concern that lawmakers may not reach a deal in time. Negotiations have stalled over the Democratic demands to limit the number of undocumented immigrants who can be detained. The president is laying the blame for this impasse on Democrats.
Tonight, President Trump and a potential 2020 challenger, Beto O'Rourke, they're going to hold dueling rallies in El Paso, Texas. The president has said some inaccurate things about that border city. He claims in his State of the Union address that before a wall was built there, crime was rampant. It wasn't. CNN's Lauren Fox is live on Capitol Hill with the very latest in these discussions. These conference committee members not talking, as far as we can tell, Lauren.
Well, that's right, John. There is an impasse up on Capitol Hill when it comes to that border security money. There are two sticking points that Democrats and Republicans were not able to resolve over the weekend. One of them, how much money to give the president for his border wall. The other, how many detention beds to allow. Democrats want to cap the number of detention beds. Republicans saying that that is a non-starter. So where do they go from here? The conference committee is not scheduled to meet as of now today, which is, of course, concerning. Given that that deadline is coming up on Friday, Democrats and Republicans may have to look at short-term options to avert a government shutdown. And the White House is not promising that there won't be a government shutdown. Here's what the president's chief of staff, Mick Mulvaney, had to say.
We cannot definitively rule out a government shutdown at the end of this week.
You absolutely cannot, and here's why.
Okay.
Let's say, for sake of this discussion, that the Democrats prevail and the hardcore left-wing Democrats prevail. There was a Democrat congresswoman who put out a tweet yesterday about $0 for DHS. So let's say that the hardcore left wing of the Democrat Party prevails in this negotiation, and they put a bill on the president's desk with, say, zero money for the wall, or $800 million, some absurdly low number. How does he sign that? He cannot in good faith sign that.
The president of the United States tonight, of course, in El Paso, trying to convince people to support his border wall. He will be having a dueling match with the Democrat Beto O'Rourke, a former congressman, who will also be holding a rally tonight in El Paso. John and Allison.
Lauren, thank you very much. Joining us now is Nia Malika Henderson, CNN senior political reporter, Joe Lockhart, former Clinton White House press secretary, and Mark McKinnon, former senior advisor to the George W. Bush and McCain campaigns, and creator, executive producer, and co-host of The Circus, which airs Sunday nights on Showtime. And I know you have a little clip for us that we will get to momentarily. Great to see all of you. Joe, it's deja vu all over again. I mean, here we are again with our countdown clock, talking about how many days they have, just 4 left to figure out the government shutdown. And I'm just wondering, has anything changed this time around, given that the Democrats do seem to have new demands about beds and how many people ICE can detain, that they would be shouldering the blame? Has the calculus shifted this week?
I don't know that they'll be shouldering the blame. I don't think the public has been following the conference committee discussions. They will tune back into this when the countdown clock gets to about Wednesday.
Yeah.
They did tune in to the shutdown, and it was a problem for Trump. I mean, I think this is a typical conference committee negotiation. It looks like the Democrats have given a little bit on border security and, providing some without giving in to the whole.
What did they give? More money?
More money. And in return, Mulvaney was just talking about the hard left of the Democratic Party. Nancy Pelosi is not the hard left of the Democratic Party. This proposal is a moderate proposal on ICE detention. There are people in the Democratic Party who want to abolish ICE. It's a ridiculous idea. But limiting the number of beds makes ICE go out and not act indiscriminately, makes them go out and act strategically.
After the criminals.
After the criminals. So
that seems to be a new piece in the discussion.
It is a new piece in the discussion, but again, in any negotiation, when you give something, you expect something back, except with Trump, who says, I get everything or nothing.
What do you make of the fact that it is apparently a new part of this discussion, Mark? And I talked to Dan Kildee, the chief deputy whip among the Democrats last hour, and he said the situation is this. We're giving something in these negotiations, hinting, I think, that Democrats will allow some new money for some new barriers. We're giving that. We want something in return. In return, what they want is a Democratic priority where there are fewer detentions in the interior.
Well, if that's right, and if they're willing to give something, and something can be called a wall or a fence or something that gets into the semantics for the Republicans and Trump, then that could be a deal.
So, I mean, Nia, this is, as Joe just said, this is sort of a standard negotiation, but it doesn't feel that way.
Right.
Because the stakes are so high, and because we've just come off of this government shutdown, and because we know that President Trump has such an unorthodox way of negotiating. It doesn't feel like what's happening right now is standard operating procedure.
I think that's right. And the big question kind of off on the side here is, A, whether or not the president even really wants a deal, or does he want Democrats as a permanent foil, right? If you hear him talk about Democrats, he essentially says they're for open borders, that they're captive of the far left. So it's kind of hard to imagine him sitting down and signing a bill where there is compromise between the Democrats and Republicans. And you've all obviously heard him talk about, too, this idea that he's been setting the table for a national emergency. And we imagine that when he goes down to El Paso this evening, he's going to be further setting that table in the way that we've already heard him talk about the dangers of these folks coming from the southern border. Now, this is a national emergency and a national security threat to America's families. Much of the data doesn't support many of the things he said, but that I think has been what's been hanging over these negotiations, making them feel not like most negotiations. And of course, if you're one of those 800,000 federal workers or contractors, it must feel very, very scary at this point.
The problem for the president is he's getting closer and closer to pulling the trigger on a national emergency. And that's problematic because not only do the Democrats oppose that, there's Republicans that oppose it. And your old friend Hillary Clinton talked to us about that.
Let's listen to that.
I just don't think you should call national emergencies unless there truly is a national emergency. There's no national emergency at our border. And he's frustrated because he can't even convince his own party to support his requests. And he shouldn't be breaking new ground and causing new precedents that, really could come back to not only haunt him, but haunt our country. So he should go through regular order.
So I think one of the things that's upsetting the Democrats now is they're realizing that no matter what the conferees agree to, no matter what deal is made, it does seem the president is preparing to declare just the emergency that Hillary Clinton and even some Republicans are warning against.
Well, that's right. But as she pointed out, and as I've heard from a lot of my old friends on the Hill, Republican senators, there's going to be a lot of them that won't like that option. And then it creates all kinds of new problems, too. So I hope the legislative morass gets untangled somehow in the next 4 days, because I think Trump will go to the emergency option if he has to.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's also interesting. You heard her say even Republicans won't go along with it, but they are going along with his demands right now, Joe. Yeah. But when Republicans controlled Congress, this didn't come up. This could have been resolved then.
Yeah, I think they're uncomfortable with it, but they won't oppose the president. Donald Trump has managed to seize control of the Republican Party. And all of these men and women, and particularly in the Senate, know that when they face re-election in 2020, if Trump says, you've crossed me, they're going to have a hard time winning. I think there's a little bit of context for all of this, and it's been forgotten a little bit. Trump made immigration and the wall the central issue of the midterms. The people spoke. Democrats swept into power in Washington. So when we talk about leverage, the Republicans have very little leverage. I think it's clever of them to make this about, ICE beds and, a new issue and all that. But the public doesn't support the president on the wall. And the people have spoken. And, I think in the end, he will shoulder the blame if he decides to shut the government down.
You know who's going to speak on it tonight? In El Paso, Beto O'Rourke.
Yeah. What about that?
That's going to be really interesting. Yeah. He's coming off his emo tour, and now he's going to get on an issue that he's passionate about. Not only passionate about, it's his backyard. I think this is an opportunity for Beto O'Rourke to get back in the game.
And Nia, when you're watching these dueling events tonight, what are you looking for? And let's just be clear that the president going to El Paso 4 days before this shutdown, I'm not sure that's going to help in the negotiations.
I think that's right. And when we've seen the president do that before, have a kind of a big televised moment before or during these negotiations. Yeah, I think the Beto thing is going to be fascinating to watch. What kind of crowd does he draw? He's obviously been with Oprah this last week. A lot of that hasn't aired. Does he seem presidential? This will be his, I think, really first big foray into politics right now. He's given some interviews. He didn't seem to know much about policy in terms of immigration. He's probably going to go more with sort of big themes. At least that's what we've seen from him so far. What kind of crowd does he draw in comparison to the president? So I think that's going to be one of the most fascinating things to come out of this evening. He has said that he's going to make some sort of decision about jumping into this race by the end of the month. Whether or not that's an announcement or just a sort of private decision, we'll have to see. But all eyes are going to be on him, particularly Democrats who are looking to see where this field is going to go.
Joe, let's talk about Virginia, what's happening in Virginia. So the governor says he's not going anywhere. He believes he's the best person to navigate through this crisis that he's in the middle of. Right. You understand damage control. You've had to navigate your way through some political crises. What's going to happen here?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I started my political campaigning career in Virginia. I did 2 races in 1981 and 1982. None of this surprises me. Racism had a stronghold among too many people in Virginia. I think it does differentiate the parties. Everyone I hear from in the Democratic Party says all 3 of these guys have to go, even if it means risking losing the governorship.
But what if they don't go, Joe? Then what does that mean politically for the party?
I think it causes some problems, but I think it's outweighed by the idea that Democrats will continue to pound on these people and make the difference and make a distinction, which is if you're Al Franken and you're credibly accused by 8 women, someone like Kirsten Gillibrand will stand up and say you have to go, and the party follows him behind. If you're Steve King, well, let's slap your wrist and take some committee things away from you. And, all around the country, just this weekend, I saw 2 Republican legislators talking about, in the most homophobic ways you could possibly talk about, there is silence. And the one person you've never heard from in all of this is the leader of the Republican Party. Have you ever heard him say anything about Steve King, Donald Trump? No. So I think it is a valuable distinction. I wouldn't create it this way, but I think Democrats can make the best of it.
Are the Democrats learning, sorry, and I'll get to you, Nia, are the Democrats learning the message from the president here, which is the way to get past scandals? Just wait it out. Just wait it out. It worked for him repeatedly.
In some ways, and it certainly looks like those top 3 officials in Virginia are going to do that. There was some sense that there were going to be impeachment articles introduced in Virginia. It looks like that might not happen in regards to Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax. They're all calling for investigations. Northam is, as well as Fairfax. I don't know sort of what the mechanism of that would be. But if you look at the polling, it seems like Virginians are essentially split on this in terms of whether or not they want Northam to stay. It looks like he's got maybe a little bit more support for staying than going, a little bit more support among African Americans in staying than going. There is a sense of pragmatism among folks in Virginia in terms of those top 3 folks staying, and it looks like they might be able to wait it out, even though you have Democrats trying to draw that bright line, which is saying these folks should go because they can't really represent the state. But listen, people in the state feel a bit differently.
Listen, if all 3 stay, Virginia is a very important, pivotal campaign state in 2020. And if there's all 3 Democrats are in there, that gives a powerful weapon for Republicans to run against those 3 and maybe take the state.
I think it's a 2019 state, too. They replaced the entire legislature.
That's right.
I think that's right. Yeah. I think it matters more for 2019 than 2020. No one will likely campaign in 2020 with any of these folks. They can campaign with Tim Kaine. They can campaign with Mark Warner. But it's going to be between Donald Trump and whoever the Democratic nominee is. I don't think there's going to be a big calculus in terms of what Northam did or didn't do.
But, Mark, do you think that President Trump, having weathered all of his scandals that everybody remembers or doesn't at this point because there's been so many, does he give all politicians now a license to stay put?
Well, I think that's what they're counting on. They're trying that playbook. And I think to some degree, just as a society, we're sort of inured to this sort of stuff because we've just seen so much of it at this point. So, maybe so.
I hope not. Honestly, I hope not. I think when you do these things, politicians should be held to a high standard. And even it sends the message that racism is okay, sexual assault's okay, and they should go.
Thank you all very much. Great to talk to you.
Putting the hat on. Job done. Riding out of town now.
The House Intelligence Committee crossing the president's red line, investigating his finances. What do they want to find out? We ask one member next.